Welcome to the Divine Renovation Podcast. Divine Renovation is a Catholic ministry dedicated to parish renewal. We provide coaching and tools to help parishes escape maintenance mode, reclaim their purpose, and get back on track for mission. On today's podcast, Father Zane Godwin joins us from Cape Town, South Africa. Father Zane shares how moving to a culture of mission has translated into 30 altar servers, multi-lingual worship music, and a youth ministry that just received 17 new teens into the church. Enjoy today's episode.
Hello and welcome to the Divine Renovation Podcast, where we are sharing stories to inspire you on your journey of parish renewal. These stories are happening all over the world and are stories of change and transformation as people go on mission. And the reality is, this could be your story. This is you in these stories that can make the difference and can move a parish from maintenance to mission. So hello and welcome again to my co-host, President of Divine Renovation, Dan O'Rourke.
Jacqueline! Always good to hang out with Jacqueline. Hi, Jacqueline.
Father Zane Godwin is amazing, and I'm just delighted that everyone gets to hear from him because he is a delight. I'm so excited to have him on, to have you chat with him as well, Dan. He is a parish priest down in Cape Town in South Africa in a little area called Maitland. And I got in touch with him first because his coach and then Paul Lang, that regional guide, was like, you have to talk to this guy about his heart for evangelization and what's going on in his parish. So I'm very excited to get him on and hear more about all of that.
Oh, I can't wait to hear his story.
Hello and welcome, Father Zane. I'm so glad you're on the podcast today.
Hello, Jacqueline. Good to be here. Thank you very much.
So I am dying to have you share a bit about your parish and your region and tell Dan about all those things. But you just got back from the Camino. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. I walked the Camino del Norte through the month of June into July. Yeah, it was a wonderful experience. 20,000 meters elevation gain, 20,000 meters descent over 32 days. It was the feet did a good amount of walking, a good amount of work.
I feel, Father Zane, I'm feeling like a lightweight. You just said you've walked a few Caminos. It's like, holy smokes, dude.
I have, yeah. I find it while I still can, while I'm young enough, I suppose, to do it and fit enough to do it. I find it an extraordinary experience, spiritually, physically, socially. It just feels healthy in every respect and really refreshing. I come back with new ideas and creativity and really, really refreshed.
I love, Dan, how you're like, a few Caminos. Or Dan, are you trying to tell me that you have not done a few? You've just done 4 or 2?
Well, what is few? Few's 3, right? So no, I haven't done a few. Yeah.
So I heard from Matt, who you've been coaching with Matt Regetz from Divine Renovation for what, like 2 years? Is that probably right?
Oh, no, very short time, actually. I think we met just briefly before I started walking the Camino.
Oh my gosh.
And then we've met once since, but we had a great discussion.
Oh, I love it. Because I was given this little hint of that you had all these great stories from the Camino of how you started to think through like evangelization and parish renewal on the Camino, which I am so curious about. Like, how did that connect for you?
Yeah, I think every Camino that I've walked has been a lesson in evangelization, and each one's completely different because not only have I done different routes, but you end up with different companions, and that's in a way, many ways, determines the kind of experience that you have. I mean, I think the first Camino that I walked in 2015, the French route, there ended up being about sort of 20 to 30 young people in their 20s and 30s who basically kept together as a kind of Camino family. And we would more or less arrange where to meet every evening so that we could have the Eucharist together, either me celebrating the Eucharist or going to a local church together. And I'm still in contact with many of those people now, really. And I had intended to walk incognito without telling anybody I was a priest. And I remember on the first night, somebody asked me, so what do you do? And I thought, oh no, this is maybe something spiritual. I can't start off by lying,
I'm an accountant.
Yeah. So I said I'm a priest. And then there was a young woman on my left. We were washing clothes. I remember down in the basement of the albergue in Roncesvalles. And she said, oh, my brother's a priest as well. And she was connected to a whole lot of people. And the man on my right, Etienne, was from Paris, who spoke English very well. And he was so excited that I was a priest. And so he connected me with a whole lot of people. And I'm still in contact with the two of them. And in fact, Etienne came to Cape Town with his new wife for their honeymoon and stayed with me. So we were connected. So there are lots of stories of stories of faith, but also it was the kind of thing where somebody would come up to you and say, I heard that you're a priest. Can I talk to you? You know, my girlfriend wants to have a baby and I don't feel like I'm ready to have a baby yet. You know, so it's sort of, there was kind of a passport into people's lives by the Camino. And so I think that it does that. This last one, I think because I've done a few Caminos now, the experience has kind of matured. I have ended up doing Caminos which have fewer people. The northern routes, for example, the Permitivo that I did a few years ago, and now this Del Norte, fewer people. So the groups are smaller. But I think the relationships have been different as well. And I also learned, I didn't go there proclaiming that I was a priest, but people found out that I was a priest along the way. And there ended up being quite a few lessons just in terms of accompaniment. I found myself thinking about building relationships and building trust, accompanying people. And then out of that came the opportunities to share faith, to answer questions too, and also that it's not evangelization is not a one-way street. I was in turn being evangelized by people that, as I was also trying to share faith with them. It was a kind of a dialogue and a very beautiful, very enriching experience. I think. I heard things that I just took for granted, but people thought, well, here's a priest walking among us, and he's in shorts and a T-shirt, and he's sharing a bunk bed in a dormitory, you know. And they appreciated I think maybe many of them came from situations where they hadn't experienced the church or priesthood in that way, and that sort of closeness to them meant something to them. And for me, it was just something that was obvious or that I would just take for granted. But the fact that I wasn't in a clerical church, shirt, actually was meaningful for people. That they felt that I was one of them, and walking along, sharing their experience. Yeah.
I love your reflection on sort of the experience of accompaniment and how it goes both ways. And you share a little bit about the feeling of evangelization, how it can go back and forth. And as you got me just thinking. One of the great privileges I feel like we have inside Divine Renovation, the ministry. I mean, like we're, as we accompany a priest like you, it's like, yeah, we're looking to support you, but man, oh man, do we ever feel blessed by the things we learn from you and the way that stuff comes into the ministry and then gets shared, and those stories. I mean, like the very fact you're here on this podcast is a reflection of that. It's like what a privilege it is for us, for me, to be able to benefit from the stories of what God's doing in you and in your parish, and to again hope some of those bless others as they hear those stories. And so it's isn't that what accompaniment's like, though? Whether it's happening on sort of the level of a Divine Renovation ministry along with a parish priest, but also at the level of a couple people walking down the Camino together, right? Like we bless each other by being together.
Yeah. Also, there's a sense that God is already at work, and that any one of us just plays a very small part. One of the stories which really framed my whole experience of this Camino was. Right at the beginning, before I actually started walking, I had to go from Madrid airport in 2 stages to get to Irún, where we'd start walking. So I stopped off in Burgos and went to the Camino albergue there, stayed for the night. But I was able to go to Mass the evening that arrived, and then earlier the next morning I went to Mass. The evening Mass that I went to when I first arrived there, there were a whole lot of pilgrims there from all over the world who... Some of them had already been walking the French route because Burgos is on the French route. And there were many who were starting to walk from there. And so I remember after Mass, there was a kind of cloudburst, and we were all just at the doors of the cathedral. And there were people from all around the world, and we just started talking. And it was this extraordinary experience of meeting people from different walks of life, and men, women, young, old, all different languages. The next morning, I was going to get a bus to Irun, and I went back to Mass again. And I got more than I bargained for, because I was expecting, it was that first Tuesday after Pentecost. So it was meant to be, to my mind, a green Mass, which would have been quite refreshing. And it was going to be a short Mass, and I would be able to, 30 minutes, and I'd be able to go to get the bus to Irun. Instead, it ended up being the feast day of a Saint Ferdinand, a king who had built the cathedral in the 12th century. So it was a sung Mass with morning prayer, with lots of priests and organs and singing and everything. So yeah, sort of kneeling in the pews there, sort of experienced that. But a thing that really struck me during that Mass, and it stayed with me all the way through, and the lesson of it stayed right through the Camino, was during communion time. I wasn't concelebrating. I was just kneeling there. Within my line of sight, I saw this young man, probably late 20s, early 30s. He was very prayerful. But when it came to communion time, he stayed kneeling. And I'm sure he didn't know that anybody could see him. And I just happened to notice him. He didn't go up for communion, but he just very discreetly was striking his chest, very discreetly. And I was aware of it. And I think as a priest, I'm aware of people not going up for communion. I always feel I really long for people to have this experience. But what struck me about that man was his raw authenticity before God. There was to do that, to be in that position, and the way he was expressing himself was so inspiring and so beautiful. Even though I longed for him to receive Holy Communion, in many ways I was envious of just that genuineness before God. And I sort of prayed for him, but at the same time reflected that probably I'd benefit more from his prayers than he would benefit from mine. But it also led me to think that there's a story there. There's a backstory, and that every single person has got a backstory. And that stayed with me right throughout the Camino. And I don't know what that backstory is. I don't know what his personal salvation history story is. I sort of get hints of my own as I go along. But God is at work already. So you're on holy ground. Take off your shoes. Approach with great caution. Try and remove the presumptions that you normally would have, and listen a lot more before you speak. Wait to build up a trust relationship before you speak into a situation, because God is already present there. There's a story which precedes the event of you meeting that person and accompanying that person. And so I think I started the Camino walking then, just looking at people in a different way, and without knowing what their backstory was, just realizing everybody has a story of God working in their lives up till that point, and will continue working. And we would sort of intersect just for a very short time, and that would be a privileged moment. But I'm not completely responsible for that person. That person is God's responsibility, and I might have a small role to play. Most likely, though, I would learn more from them than they would learn from me. So that's kind of stayed with me right through the experience of the Camino, and that really framed my thinking about evangelization as accompaniment.
I need a moment after that. that was so good. And it just really hit me, because there's so much freedom in that. When evangelization is about being part of this beautiful interweaving of stories, and the fact that you said God is already at work here, tread carefully.
Yeah.
That, Father, that's this whole other framing of not I better get in there and do something, or this person, the sins they're gonna do. It's instead God's already at work, and meeting up with each other is this gift of seeing the reflection of our image maker in each other. Thomas Merton said, I'm not going to quote this perfectly, something sincerity, a little sincerity goes a long way with God. And I love that so much. This idea that, like, even when we can just edge towards the authenticity of admitting where we really are at, God's like, thank you. Thank you just like for that much.
Yeah. I think also with that, realizing that God is already at work, comes a deep respect and even a reverence. That there's no room for presumption there. And the best you can do is to accompany, to develop a relationship in which a conversation could take place. I mean, I remember one person who I'm now very close to, and we're in good contact since the Camino. I remember she knew that I was a priest, I think for a day or two, and we were walking along. I think it was raining even, and she all of a sudden said, you're a priest, can I ask you a question? And I was expecting some profound question. I thought, sure, okay, this is wonderful. It's going to be a new sort of dimension to this friendship which is developing. And I thought some spiritual question would come up or something like that. Instead, I was confronted with the most inane question possible. It was like, so what do you think about having to pay to go into churches? As we were walking past and in parts of the world. I thought, well, of all the questions, I mean, how unprofound could you be given? What a question could you be given? But here's the thing. I think it's people test the waters. I think people also are entering into this trust relationship, and they will see how you will handle a question like that, and the other questions will follow. But it's a process, and you've got to start somewhere. And so even just to respect that, because it takes trust. The Camino is extraordinary because there's a certain vulnerability to sharing your life and your stories as you go along anyway. So perhaps even more for daily life, that it takes time. Trust needs to develop. And there needs to be genuine relationship. People are not projects. People are not something that we can just hit very quickly and then finish what we want to do there and move on. I think it's in the context of genuinely loving people and being interested in people and respecting people. So I think I learned that as well, that it takes time. Don't rush this. You've got to develop trust.
Honestly, I feel like that also segues right into your work as a parish priest, because you're talking about loving people and not seeing them as projects. And when I hear you talk about your own parish, I hear that love. So I'd love to talk a little bit about, so your parish, is it called Maitland, the suburb that you're in of Cape Town?
Yeah, Maitland, quite close to the city bowl, the main sort of center of the city, and and historically quite some interesting place because under apartheid it originally would have been a kind of a so-called white suburb, and then over the years has become more integrated, and then probably so 15 years ago it received a whole influx of people from other African countries because there was a Home Affairs office quite close to the parish here, which was dealing with refugees and migrants. And so that caused a whole lot of people just moving here, which makes for a very, very interesting sort of dynamic and demographic here at Maitland.
So in a way, people are moving through your area. But I think you're talking about journeying through and the Camino. This is an area of transition for a lot of people then.
Yeah. Well, we have the South African community as well. And so one of the big challenges over the years has been how do you integrate these different communities, the very, very different worldviews, different backgrounds. How do you create one community, one Christian community out of all these different people? And that's a thing we worked at particularly hard here in Maitland, with some success, I think, as well.
So on your journey of parish renewal, what was the desire of your heart for your parish? What do you still want to see it become? And what was that original starting point of, this is not okay, or I have this discontent and I want to go somewhere with this?
Yeah, I think it can be... there can be some illusion here in Cape Town because we're quite a youthful church, and Africa is pretty vibrant and so on. And I think particularly what can create a bit of an illusion is that when you have so many migrants and refugees coming into a local church like Cape Town, and particularly an area like Maitland and others around here, you can easily get the sense that the church is vibrant and the church is full and the pews are full. But I think I've been here, this is my 9th year now, end of the year will complete 9 years. I think fairly early on, I realized that this was an illusion, that actually there was a great turnover of people and a sense of we can't just keep on doing the same things and expect that it'll be okay. Because I think I remember saying back in about 2015, 2016, if we carry on like this, the church will be empty in 20 years' time. Because I was able to see through, and many others could see through that illusion that everything was fine. And what really struck home was COVID. Because I think COVID, more than creating problems for the church and creating challenges, really showed us where our weaknesses were. That COVID was like a kind of school teaching us that it would have been easy just to blame everything on COVID, but actually all the problems were there before, but they were masked over to some degree. And in fact, I had started reading James Mallon's book, Divine Renovation, together with a group of priests before Divine Renovation, and then again before COVID, and we carried on reading a little bit into COVID, and we were meeting on Zoom and having discussions once a week, and we put into place quite a lot of the sort of divine renovation principles here in the parish prior to COVID, and sure, I think that certainly helped us. We were when COVID hit, we already had quite a good network of connecting people and using WhatsApp and email and Zoom and Facebook. So we were able to sort of hold on to people to a certain degree and communicate with them. But after COVID, post-COVID, pretty much had to start again, because the community has changed. So I found in Divine Renovation and the principles there some kind of hope, because it sort of met that discontent that I felt within me, that this is not okay. We can't carry on like this and expect that it's going to work, that it'll be fine, that the church will empty, that there are no young people here. Where are the young people? And if we carry on like this, we are going to be in big trouble. So that Divine Renovation has kind of answered that need. Well, what can we do about it? Well, let's try this. Let's try this.
Yeah, Father Zane, it's it's your experience there in Cape Town isn't all that uncommon with other countries around the world, in the sense that there's so many places that experience the illusion of church health as a result of immigration or population growth, right? We find ourselves in a context where we've got macro trends, and we're using those macro trends to diagnose micro realities, right? So, my church is growing plenty. It's like, well, if your church is growing plenty, is it growing through evangelization of the people that were there, or is it growing through people moving there? And so these are two different things, right? And so many parts of the world, especially those parts that are most inclined to think they're healthy, it's a direct result of those macro trends. And so for those who might be listening, assessing your own macro trends is essential in terms of understanding what your church ought to be like. If your population is growing by 10% in your community, then is your church growing by 10%? Is it staying the same? Is it declining? How do you compare to those realities?
And so, people who are migrants and refugees are people on the move. There are extraordinary stories associated with them, and they're looking for a better life for themselves, and many of them are supporting families back at home, or just trying to do something better for their own young family here. And so there are people constantly looking for opportunities, and it can be quite heartbreaking, but understandable that you build relationships here with people, you get to know them really well, then you train them up, they're involved in ministry, active in the parish, and then they're off to places like Canada if they can, because Cape Town ends up being kind of a gateway to places like Australia and Canada. Many seem to prefer Canada. And even the UK. I mean, these people who come from other African countries have a very vibrant faith, an extraordinarily deep faith, and very inspiring and beautiful ways of praying. So they really are a gift. But it does mean that the parish community is changing constantly, and one has to. You can never say, okay, we've got all the people that we want in ministry now, because that's going to change over a period of months. So you constantly need to be inviting new people into ministry. But here's the thing: when I arrived, one of the big things that had to change here, when I arrived here, I would say, this is a perception, that migrants and refugees were tolerated. And the South African community didn't quite know how to engage with them. I don't think there's ever been any sort of way of bringing people together and starting to share faith and express themselves as one community. So people were even perhaps made moderately welcome, although there are many stories to the contrary. But there wasn't a sense that we should be one parish community. As a result, these people who come from other African countries were not involved in ministries. And I think there was one person from another African country on the parish pastoral council, which is, I think, the equivalent of what you would call the senior leadership team there. And that person, I think, in 2 years only came to one meeting and came late. So they're largely absent from the kind of the running of the parish and the sense of vision of what we were trying to do in the parish. And I remember in consultation with the team arranging a particular weekend where we would, a particular Sunday, we said everybody who comes from another country and anybody who's interested in people who come from other countries, let's meet. And we met in the parish hall, and the first thing we did was try to get them to tell stories, to say, what was your first experience of coming here? What did you experience? What were the challenges? What were the difficulties? And some of the stories were inspiring, and some were heartbreaking, of people who didn't feel welcome. Well, a heartbreaking story would be of a migrant or refugee family who would come in and sit down and then be told to move, because that's not that. The South African people would say, well, no, that's our seat. We always sit there, So people who felt decidedly unwelcome, and the sort of humiliation and embarrassment of having to move seats. And we have a very small church with a narrow central aisle. And so it's quite movement is quite difficult. So I didn't see that happen. And I would have been heartbroken to see it. But to hear somebody tell the story a long time after the fact, full of the emotion that went with that, just of just how tough that was, And I mean, the people then who still keep coming back despite having experiences like that, quite amazing. But a beautiful story would be the learning of names. I think I've got some many idiosyncrasies, but one of the strange things is I can remember faces and names. And I remember this man. I still remember his name is Noel, and he was from Uganda. And I met him on the church steps before Mass the one day, and greeted him, asked him his name, and he told me who he was and where he was from, and I welcomed him. And the following week, by some gift of God's grace, I saw him again and greeted him by name. And I didn't make any fuss of that. But at that meeting, he said, I'd been going to various places trying to find a home. And I would spend 1 week and 2 weeks and maybe in this parish and then another parish. But on that particular day, he referred to that incident, which I hadn't remembered even. And he said, the priest asked my name, and we chatted. He made me feel welcome. And the following week, as I walked up, he greeted me by name. And he said, as a result, I've never been to another parish since. This is my parish now. This is where I belong. So stories like that, realizing the power just of being welcoming, of learning people's names, of connecting with people like that, has harnessed the tremendous gifts that people have to offer to create a Christian community. And it's about those relationships, about connecting with people. And so at that meeting, when we gathered everyone, I said, yeah, we have to start changing things here. So right here and now, among yourselves, you've heard each other tell stories. Elect 2 people. We'll co-opt them onto the parish pastoral council immediately,
Wow.
And we put them onto the parish pastoral council, which gave a kind of visibility, but also a legitimacy to this other aspect, the other dimension of the community here. And then we with that, we started actively recruiting people who are migrants and refugees into the different ministries. And and within a short time, it transformed this whole place. And if you look at the Parish Pastoral Council now, it's probably 60% migrants and refugees, but that's already now the third generation following that first initiative. And so things started to change. And with that, certain gifts, like one of the things we do, the fourth Sunday of every month, even if there is a fifth Sunday, every fourth Sunday, we celebrate the cultural diversity of this place. And so people are, the one particular Mass, the 10:30 Mass on Sunday, people are invited to share their own songs and their music and their dress. And we have African drums and sort of liturgical dancing, bringing up the gifts and so on. And it's created a kind of community which we've named after our first blessed here in South Africa, Blessed Benedict Daswa. They call themselves Blessed Benedict Daswa Community. And initially they were formed to plan this liturgy once a month, which they would then do as a kind of ministry for the rest of the parish. And they've taught each other their songs. And there are South Africans in the group, and there are people from all over Africa. And they've taught each other their songs and their music. And they meet to practice and to prepare the liturgy. And so we have the readings in different languages with the English on a data projector. And we have the prayers of the faithful in different languages. And we have all the songs and parts of the Mass in different languages. That community have become more than just a community who prepare a liturgy. They really are a small Christian community to each other. And so I happen to be on their WhatsApp group, which can be quite busy, but they wish each other happy birthday, and their children. And I remember when one young couple had to go, were going back to their own home country for a wedding, which we'd prepared them for here within this kind of community. They got together a collection to send this couple back to the home country in Malawi for the wedding. And with getting to know people as well through that community, you would say, well, here your beautiful family, lovely children. Why are these children not attending catechism? So as soon as you start to know names and get to know people, and you can start greeting them in their own home language, or Chichewa or Shona or whatever, then you can say, well, why are these children not at catechism? Then you start to hear the stories. No, they can't go to catechism because they're not baptized. Well, why are they not baptized? Well, no, in our country where we come from, they can't be baptized because we haven't been married in church yet, the mother and father. So that starts conversations. What can we do? Well, we can fix all those things, and we can fix all those things. So let's go through a period of marriage preparation, but let's baptize these children straight away and get them into the catechism program. So you're able to do that, and it's just something really wonderful happens in terms of connecting with people, forming families who are attached to each other, and. Yeah, and as you can imagine, then when sometimes you have to say goodbye to those people, it's pretty heartbreaking,
Father Zane, you're dropping so much gold right now. It's like I'm running around trying to catch it all. So one of the things that I hear a lot when I talk with parish leaders is, like how are the best parishes dealing with multiculturalism, and this happens. It's interesting because you're where you are is perhaps driving a degree of innovation that I'm hearing in your story. Like it's driving a degree of innovation in your story that's a little different than I think some other areas, because a lot of big cities deal with questions of well, how do we do this? We got like a large Polish community or a large Hispanic. It doesn't matter. There's all sorts of different styles of those cultural contexts. But what landed with me was you sharing your story about how you brought them together to tell their story. Yeah. And just how powerful, that was, and indeed how it allowed you to begin to act. I personally believe that, it's funny where this conversation has been going so far, right? I personally believe that, it's really accompaniment that is what brings health, right? It's that how do we walk together, both as individuals, as Christians who are followers in Jesus? How do we do that well together and be brothers and sisters in Christ? And then, on a higher level, as parishes, as communities, as Divine Renovation, the ministry, along with priests who are eager and open. It's like, how do we walk together through this stuff? So as we go on mission together and we grow in fellowship and share. And so I believe strongly in the importance of accompaniment in terms of bringing about the change that I think the Holy Spirit's trying to bring about in his church. But in addition to that, I believe in the power of story, right? It's like, there's a reason we've got Jacqueline on team, or a full-time storyteller. It's like, I believe it's the stories that change minds and hearts, right? It's like, and listening to your story, I'm just thinking, oh, wow. I pray that, there's people listening who are dealing with that multicultural challenge and are listening to how you managed your way through it, where you brought people together, you allowed them to give voice to their story, both the good and the bad. I mean, like, you shared the, a painful story of, and it's like, wow, that stuff, that the story changed your parish. It began the transformation of your parish, and it began to change the way that, the communities began to merge, right? And it's also enabling. I pray it helps others do the same.
Yeah, well, there's another side to it. One of the sort of maxims we use here is that when we have that sort of cultural mass, the Benedict Gospel mass, the hope is that somebody who's visiting for the first time, who just walks in, they might hear their language in a prayer of the faithful, or in a reading, or in a song, and they'll say, I'm welcome here. This can be my place. My culture and my language are respected here. So there's a place for me here. And in that as well, that you can, once you get to know people, and somebody's just arrived, say, and he's 18 years old and he's from the DRC, and he's looking slightly awkward at whatever, somebody can notice them, ask the name, where are you from, and then say, call somebody else who also is from there, who speaks the same language, and connect them to each other. And very often, the next entry point is that there's a Benedict Daswa community that are well placed to just include those people, embrace them, and give them something to do, and where they can use their own language and their own song, and they've got something immediately to offer, and they are sort of adopted by the community. So, yeah, it may sound like it's all perfect. I promise you, it's far from that. But it's there's some very beautiful elements in it here.
How do you make sure that those communities aren't fracturing and becoming totally independent? Like, how do you hold them together so they feel like they're one parish community, that they're one, this is our parish as a community? Yeah,
that's an important question, because traditionally the approach has been, and still is in this local church of Cape Town, of having chaplaincies. So there's a Zimbabwean chaplaincy, and a Malawian chaplaincy, and a Portuguese chaplaincy, and an Italian chaplaincy, and just about every, and a French chaplaincy, and a Nigerian chaplaincy. And so many of the parishes that I know of operate sort of like a parish, but they'll have the Nigerian mass, or they'll have the French mass, sort of 3:00 in the afternoon. And so people have approached here frequently to say, can the Zimbabweans have a mass, or can the Zimbabweans use the hall, the chaplaincy? And my consistent message has been here, while I understand perhaps the need in other places, in this parish, we're only one community. And so, and there is a place for everyone, and we share each other's stories and songs and languages here in this one community. So we don't have a separate Zimbabwean group and a separate Malawian group and a separate Nigerian group. We're all one parish here. And of course, there could be weaknesses associated with that, but that's the vision that we've gone with here. And everybody, I think, it benefits, because there's this wonderful sort of cross-pollination and of sharing of gifts and ideas and language and song. So that's the approach we've taken here. And there's never been any consideration that we'll have a kind of a separate group. That Blessed Benedict Daswa community, many of those people are also involved in teaching catechism. They're on the parish pastoral council. They're on the finance council. They are proclaimers. They are extraordinary ministers of Holy Communion. So they're fully integrated into the rest of the parish, but they just get an opportunity on that particular Sunday at that mass to have a special expression. And Afrikaans is one of the local languages here from South Africa. They always invite somebody to do one of the prayers of the faithful in Afrikaans. So that kind of reaches out to the South African community as well. But we also have Zulu speakers and Xhosa speakers and Sesotho speakers from South Africa who are fully part of that community as well. And Benedict Daswa himself, of course, was a South African. So we've gone with that vision that we don't want a fractured community. As it is, I'm sure you find it in most parishes now that we've got 3 masses over a weekend, a Saturday evening and 2 on a Sunday. And that can easily end up being 3 different parishes, because never the train shall meet, in the sense that people who are only going on a Saturday night, they won't even know what's happening on a Sunday. but to try and encourage. And recently we celebrated 100 years of this little parish church, and we had the Archbishop here, and we only had one Mass on Sunday, and we sort of brought the communities together. And the stories that came out of that were extraordinary because people met each other. Some of them had heard about each other, perhaps, but hadn't actually met each other before. And others were just open to this new engagement. And we tried at that Mass to express all the different elements of that Blessed Benedict Daswa community, but also the youth. Every second Sunday of the month, so this past yesterday, 10:30 is the youth Mass. And the youth Mass, 10:30 Mass, every second Sunday of the month. And it was packed to capacity yesterday. There are we've got a tiny church, so this looks a bit extraordinary, but they're sort of close to 30 altar servers, But they've also kind of formed a little a guild.
You said 30 altar servers?
Yeah, it can easily happen. We have to reserve sort of the side chapel for them, and it's difficult to give them all work to do. But what's more important is that they're connected to each other, and they pray before Mass, and the older children are helping the younger children and equipping them for altar server ministry. But that's become a sort of a focus, and that was strategic as well. Like the Blessed Benedict Daswa community, we were worried about youth here, and we had to do something really definite, and that would cost and that would be a strategy. So we eventually employed a youth ministry coordinator, and it's the most expensive thing we do here at the parish, and it really costs us because we're not a well-resourced parish financially at all. But with that, we started LifeTeen, and the whole lot of stories that come from this. I think I spoke to Jacqueline about some of them, that we had always had the LifeTeen had the youth ministry sort of limping. We'd have the confirmation program, a group of up to 10 people, 16 people at most, right through the whole program, and then they'd be confirmed and then they're gone. And I think just about every parish experiences that. And so we had to address that. And the church it didn't have young people in it. So with the employment of a part-time youth ministry coordinator who would run the LifeTeen program, he was engaged specifically to do that. We started to build up a ministry, and bear in mind this is an impoverished area on the whole. So it's not like young people have many options. But now we have about up to 70 teenagers here every Friday night who come for LifeTeen. We started off doing Alpha with them because the Alpha program, Alpha Youth, really is quite compatible with the LifeTeen kind of model. And then going into LifeTeen, and to have up to 70 teenagers in the church for adoration, because they have a Send component of LifeTeen. You have them there for in adoration of the Blessed Sacrament, or once a term we have penitential service. And 2 weeks ago we sent 5 young people from this parish to World Youth Day, which is what you can't know how remarkable that is, because just in terms of the kinds of people that make up this parish and the resources, the fundraising went on for about 2 years to send these 5 people. Wow. But that was an enormous thing. I mean, we would have been lucky to send 1. We sent 5. So those 5 people were key people from the parish. And we had a taxi strike, which made it very difficult for people to get here. And it's cold, wet winter here at the moment. But we had 50 young people here for a penitential service. And I invited 3 other priests to help me with the confessions. And hearing 50 teenagers' confessions takes some time. But there they were all in the church. Blessed Sacrament was exposed on the altar. And so something's going to happen there. And part of that was also they are engaged every second Sunday of the month. That's their Mass. They do everything, reading, proclaiming, their extraordinary ministers of Holy Communion, everything. But of course, what happens is that just about every 10:30 Mass ends up being a more youth-oriented Mass, because they're between 20 and 30 altar servers just for a start. And once they're doing it anyway, we're now getting them to proclaim at other Masses, and they're helping with the music ministry anyway, because this is their place, that they know it,
So you're killing me over here, Father Zane. Like I had dinner with Randy Rouse, the CEO of LifeTeen, just a handful of weeks ago, and then we were talking about how we're missing an opportunity here in terms of LifeTeen and Divine Renovation working together, and also like Alpha would be just a great funnel into LifeTeen. And it's like, and we were talking about, well, man, wouldn't it be great if we could figure out, if we get some parishes to try that out? And I'm listening to you and you're like, you're doing it. you're doing exactly the same thing that, I was at a dinner table thinking about, is it possible? And it's like, holy smokes, not only are you doing it, the fruit of what you're doing, like God's blessing it like crazy.
Yeah, I'm conscious that it could be easy to give the impression that everything's perfect, but in reality, in pastoral work, it's 2 steps forward, 1 step backward. But and even in youth ministry, I mean, we before I tell this wonderful story, we had probably the wettest, coldest winter in Cape Town in living memory. And I couldn't really complain when I got back and experienced a bit of it, because I missed 5 weeks of it while I was walking in perfect conditions in Spain. But people, it really was tough. And a lot of the people in this kind of parish have to walk here. And so weather is an enormous factor in terms of attendance. So this will be one of the kind of steps backwards, because mass attendance goes down in these winter months. Add to that school holidays, and there's that sort of phenomenon of school holidays is church holidays. But out of that LifeTeen program, what happened was that Catholic teenagers started evangelizing their peers, and this is pretty unheard of anyway. In my experience, because they started bringing their friends along on Friday evenings, because something was happening here, and it wasn't just the hot chocolate, which was I know very welcome, and ends up being pretty expensive for us to just try and provide refreshments for 70 youngsters every Friday night. But they started bringing their friends because they enjoyed being here. They wanted to be with their friends. They were able to say to their friends, come, something's happening here. And we have this very definite program where not only do they have a kind of a welcome, but they have a proclaim with this Catholic teaching. And then they have the breakaway groups as part of the LifeTeen program, where they go into different sort of age groups and have discussions, and they've got leaders who are facilitating that. And then they have the prayer component at the end, the send, which could be just a simple prayer or imaginative contemplation or in the church. So they were bringing their friends who were unchurched now as part of that group of 70 on a Friday night, who unchurched, either had never been baptized or who had been baptized in some church or other, but really had not attended church since. And so we suddenly became aware, when we were hearing confessions in these penitential services as part of the send component of LifeTeen, that you'd have a young person in front of you who has never been to confession before, and then when you sort of hear, well, they haven't been baptized, so you can pray with them, and there's no time to teach them theology at that stage, but you can at least pray with them. But it raised the question, they wanted some kind of experience like that, but they weren't able to receive it, and they hadn't been catechized for it. They were at Mass on Sundays, but they weren't able to receive Holy Communion. And we have a tradition here in Cape Town, I'm sure it's in other parts of the world, where people come up for a blessing, and they put arms across their chest or one arm. And so I was blessing all these teenagers at communion time, and then hear the experience of confessions that they weren't able to receive the sacrament of reconciliation. And so it prompted thinking, well, how do we deal with this quite extraordinary phenomenon that unheard of in Catholic sort of experience, that you've got Catholic teenagers who are effectively evangelizing their peers and bringing them to this church experience where they're going through Alpha and LifeTeen and so on. So canon law says that anybody who's over the age of 14 needs to receive all 3 sacraments of initiation together, unless they ask very specific pastoral situations or arguments that could be made. And we wanted to have these young people be part of the confirmation program, which overlaps perfectly with LifeTeen. So we didn't want to then extract them from that, from the LifeTeen program, and just put them through like an RCIA type experience, because we have an RCIA program here, but it's usually for much older people, and it's on a Tuesday evening. These young people who are 15, 16, 17, 18 are not going to arrive here on a Tuesday evening. They just can't. So what do you do with them? It's so prompted, well, how do we reach out to these people? So I got permission from our Archbishop to baptize those who weren't baptized, and to give First Holy Communion to those who had been baptized in other churches legitimately, and to receive them into the church. And so we took them through a very special program. We didn't have a proper name for them, but we called it Teenagers for Christ. And they were going to LifeTeen on Friday evenings, and on Sunday morning they would meet for an hour to go through this special program to get them ready for the sacraments of initiation, baptism, and First Holy Communion. And we ended up with this wonderful celebration at Pentecost Sunday. And it was my last Mass before I went to the airport to go on the Camino. where we had 17 youngsters. I don't know the number of them, so close to 10 of them were baptized, and all of them were received into the church and all made their first Holy Communion at that time. And it was an extraordinary, very encouraging event, And the Archbishop, of course, gave permission for that. And
you keep saying your parish is small. How many does your parish seat? Like if your parish building?
Yeah, the building probably comfortably at 220, 230. We could probably squeeze 250 in. But yeah, so...
and you don't need seats for 30 of them because they're up as altar servers. So that's okay.
We've got such a small sanctuary, you'd have to look at pictures. So we have to reserve all the pews in the side chapel for the altar service. Yeah, and look, and many of these Teenagers for Christ group are altar servers as well. So. And now, following that, they're in the music ministry and they're carrying on being altar servers. Some are training as sacristans, some are already proclaimers. And it's prompted another question now because a few of them are in matric, their last year of high school, and we don't quite know what we're worried about. How do we complete their Christian initiation? They're more mature. They're here for Mass every Sunday. So I'm looking to get special permission to have them confirmed at the end of this year. We've already had our parish confirmations for this year with the bishop here, but I'm looking to ask for permission that either the bishop will come here or will allow me to confirm them at the end of the year, those who are either in matric or post-matric already, to complete that, so that if they go off to university, we've already got them confirmed here, involved in ministries, trained up. But it prompted the kind of question, because there are some who are slightly older than that. But what we realized was you can't say, yes, we've got an RCIA program here on Tuesday night, and because you're 21 or 23, you have to be here every Tuesday night for an hour in the RCIA program. It's a non-starter for many of them. It's a non-starter. You just say, effectively, you're saying, go away. So you have to adapt pastorally and say, well, where are these people at? How can you reach them? And hence the program, the Teenagers for Christ. And now next week, we'll start that special confirmation program for 6 of them. Hopefully, you'll be confirmed at the end of the year. A place like this prompts you to think, because you can't have all your parish activities on a weeknight, because migrants and refugees do shift work. They've got young families. They haven't got transport. So if you're arranging something for a Tuesday evening, you're effectively saying to half the community, this is not for you. So we do our baptism preparation on a Sunday afternoon, because that's when all different areas of the community can be represented. And we try to apply that principles to other things. Like, instead of saying to people, I mean, imagine saying, well, yes, you have to go through the RCIA program. It's a year long. And you need to be here every Tuesday night with other 30, 40-year-olds, and you're only 23, 24. It's a non-starter. It'll work for some, but it won't work for others. So adapt. Be prepared to reach out, do something different,
Father Zane, what the Holy Spirit's doing through you and the leaders in that parish is astounding. Like you said it was a small parish, and you said you're doing 3 Sunday masses. So, I'm running the numbers. If you jammed your pews full, you're at like maybe 600 on a Sunday, Saturday. And I'm sure you're not jamming them that full, right? And yet still you've got 17 young people that are, on fire coming into the faith, not just, going through the paces, but are have been evangelized by their friends, their peers.
Yeah. Yeah, so this it's not as good as it sounds. So this week we would have had just under 400 people at Mass, and actually the first Mass on a Sunday morning, it's cold, it's still a bit dark. The weather wasn't too bad this past week, but the numbers have been really poor at that Mass, and it used to be packed. Pre-COVID, I remember it being really full. And at that first Mass this past Sunday, I was feeling a bit like Elijah in the cave. It was the first reading, and he was despondent. Utterly confused about how God was working. He wanted to give up. He just wanted to die. I was feeling like that during Mass and thinking, well, do we need to put the two communities together and have only one Mass on a Sunday? I was really feeling a bit down. And then it was followed by the youth Mass, because it was just packed, and there's no way that all they would have fitted into one church. So I think it could be a disservice to other people to think that everything's rosy and perfect here at Maitland. It really sometimes is frustrating, and sometimes things are not working. And I don't know how to reach out to people. We still got a small percentage of people relatively involved in ministry, and people still have a kind of consumer mentality, and so it's tough. I mean, I've got probably a bit too exacting, and my standards are a bit higher, but it's not all easy. It's tough, and sometimes just to persevere is really difficult. It would be really tempting to give up sometimes. So let me not give that impression that it's perfect by any means.
And I think as a leader, and indeed your leadership team, I mean, the tension is, let's define the reality, the things that we haven't figured out yet, but let's also celebrate the fruit. I mean, we can do both. We can say these are the things that aren't going the way that they ought to yet, that we've got to get better at, and then look at also what the Holy Spirit is doing in and through us. And you've clearly got both happening at your parish, man. Like wow, yeah, how many people listening would just love to have have the problem of, well, we're out of room for altar servers. We've expanded into the side chapel. What a fascinating challenge you've got and you've created. And what the Holy Spirit's really like this is the thing, right? These are fruits of the Spirit working through you and the others, and in that respect, they need to be honored and celebrated. And I'm also astounded still. Like, I got to give it one more voice to it, because I'm still, if we'd done nothing but talk about the way that you've dealt with the multicultural aspect of your parish, I think this conversation would have both gripped my attention and I pray blessed others, because it is a thing that so many parishes struggle with. And while I think there's more than one solution, you certainly have had one approach that clearly has driven some real fruit into your parish and your community.
I was just thinking of one of my favorite images. It doesn't happen often, but it's been a few times of altar servers arriving on their skateboards on a Saturday evening for Mass, in their sort of track shoes, and then and torn jeans and so on, and then rushing, putting an altar server cassock on, and then serving the Saturday night Mass, and then being here again on the Sunday. And some people might be liturgical purists, but I love seeing those sneakers, sort of peeping out of the bottom of the cassocks, because there's something about these young people and their lived experience, and they're managing to integrate that with coming and serving and being involved in ministry as well. So, yeah, I'm really sort of heartened by the altar service. Yeah,
that's a lovely image. That's going to stay with me. I love that. What advice would you give to someone who's in your shoes, a priest that's at a parish that's thinking, okay, I see the challenges, I can relate to that, but I have this discontent. I want us to be on mission. I want parish renewal. If you could put it in a sentence, what's that tidbit to you that's this is what I would say to your brothers, to your friends, to other parish leaders that are listening?
See, exactly. If it could be put in a sentence, it would be everybody would be doing it.
Give us a sentence and we'll write it down.
There's no sentence, really. There's no sentence. It's a process. It's being open to new ideas constantly, being ready to adapt, know who the people are and what their needs are. I mean, the journey that I went was realizing, being able to see that this is not what it should be, and that we're in trouble if we just continue like this. And then the real gift to me was reading. I think I read Rebuilt first, and then I read Divine Renovation, and look, the beginning of Divine Renovation, I think it was whatever chapter it was about House of Pain or whatever it is, and it's pretty demoralizing. So I could end up sort of wanting to give up after that. But both those books, Rebuilt and Divine Renovation, gave a sense of very practical suggestions of what you can do. And the first time I read it, I said, this is just impossible. St. Benedict's 16 full-time paid staff members, no wonder they can do it. There's no way we could ever do a thing like this in Maitland. But I had to read it again and realize that it's not a program, that they're just principles that you can start to put in place. I think, what I'm trying to do in the Archdiocese as a whole, because this is my other role, is to spread the message that no priest can do this on their own. The only way forward is to activate lay leadership, that lay people take their rightful roles in the church and work collaboratively in teams with the priest there. So to get people who have a heart for the parish like you have, and people who are gifted, and to collaborate with you, because you easily would become completely overwhelmed. There's just no way a priest could do this on their own. So, and Divine Renovation, of course, is full of that. And we really, we're not well resourced here, because either that thing of the faithful, available, contagious, and teachable. We have people here who all of those things except available, and there are very good reasons for not being available. Just parents of young children or doing shift work and so on. So it makes it tough. But you've got to work with whoever can be here, and hopefully find people who do all those four things, and work together at it, and so have a common vision that you're working towards, and activate people in that mission. So to cast that vision in the Divine Renovation language, to have buy into that vision, and to be working towards that as a group. I think it's the only way forward for the church at large, not just a small parish like this, is to have lay people play their role.
I want to thank you so much on behalf of Dan and I and Divine Renovation, because the stories you're telling are beautiful, and the honesty that you're doing it with. You're right, there are challenges and there are fruit, but like, you're giving us a glimpse of what the Holy Spirit is doing through you and in your church and in the people there, and it gets me excited. So in terms of being both of us on a road and mutually evangelizing each other, I feel encouraged from this. So I want to thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Thank you, Dan. Yeah, it's a privilege, really.